right in to our agenda. Our next item is administrative responses to the University Senate, and is presented for information, but at this time, there are no responses pending. Item 3 is a list of recent faculty and staff and student deaths that have been forwarded for announcement to the Senate. I invite you to observe a moment of silence while I go through these names. Fred Amram, Luann Anderson, Mary Austin, Keith Champlin, David Christensen, Kristen Cooper, Hiroshi Hiyasa, Michael Houston, Edward Kaplan, Haley McCullough, Christoph Pankiewicz, Robert Pepin, Steve Sprouth, and Zane Stranger. I'd also like to acknowledge that the university is grieving the loss of an individual who was tragically found last week in Appleby Hall. I know this is a very upsetting situation and different from other circumstances in which we feel sadness and express mourning. And I just want to share with you in that sadness and remind you that if you need support, there are resources available to you, and we would be happy to talk offline to direct you to the right resources. The next item is approval of the minutes of the University Senate. So we don't need a motion or a second for this. So Chris, if you could initiate the poll.
I'll give about 10 more seconds if you wish to vote. And last call. There being 120 ayes, 0 nays, and 8 abstentions, that motion prevails.
Okay, thank you, everybody. The next item are some senior leadership introductions. I'm going to start with Mercedes Ramirez Fernandez, and I'll offer a brief introduction and then invite Mercedes to give remarks. So I'm very pleased to introduce Dr. Mercedes Ramirez Fernandez, who joined us as our University Vice President for Equity and Diversity last September. Mercedes most recently served as the Richard Feldman Vice President for Equity and Inclusion and Chief Diversity Officer at the University of Rochester. And she was recruited there in 2019 to open the university's inaugural Office of Equity and Inclusion and to serve as the institution's first Chief Diversity Officer. Prior to her time in Rochester, she served as Associate Vice Provost for Strategic Affairs and Diversity at Virginia Tech. So Mercedes earned a doctorate in higher education management from the University of Pennsylvania, an MA in counseling and human development from the University of Iowa, and a BA in psychology with a concentration in Spanish literature from the University of Puerto Rico. Mercedes encompasses a lot of really amazing experience professionally and personally, has incredible judgment and a real commitment to this critical role in the university system at this critical time here in Minnesota and beyond, to achieve our goals, both in our own strategic plan and as higher ed, in making sure that our community is welcoming and equitable. So with this, please join me in welcoming Dr. Mercedes Ramirez Fernandez. Mercedes, would you like to say a few words?
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, President Gable, for that, kind and warm introduction. It is my honor to be here with all of you in this space of the Faculty Senate. I have been quite impressed, with the shared governance here at the University of Minnesota, and have been working very closely with some of our colleagues in the FCC. I look forward to continuing our work together on behalf of the many communities inside and outside the University of Minnesota. Thank you very much.
And now it's my pleasure to introduce to you Dr. Robert Stein, who's the Dean of the College of Continuing and Professional Studies, or as we generally refer to it, CCAPS. Bob was appointed Dean of CCAPS in February 2022 after serving as interim dean in the role since June 2018. Prior to that, he served as Senior Associate Dean for Academic Programs in the college for 11 years. So Bob's training is in forest genetics and organizational management. He came to the U in the 1980s and led the Minnesota Tree Improvement Cooperative and was the coordinator of the Cloquet Forestry Center and was an associate dean in the College of Food, Agriculture, and Natural Resources before he was in CCAPS. Bob's been very active in the University Professional and Continuing Education Association, including serving on the board of directors for that organization. He also represents the university at the Minnesota Job Skills Partnership Board, which is a program run here by DEED. So he's our alum, having earned his PhD here, but also holds an MS in Forest Science from Oregon State and a BA in Plant Sciences from Indiana University. So please join me in welcoming Bob. Bob, would you like to say a few words?
Yes, be happy to. Thank you, President Gable, for that introduction. And it feels a little odd to me to be being introduced now after being at the university for so many years and serving, almost finishing my 5th year as dean of the college, including that associate dean time. But great to be here. I had a conversation this morning in a meeting with someone who's been at the university for quite a while and did not even know CCAPS existed. So I'm pleased to have this opportunity to share that we do exist. We run many programs for the university, including the pre-college program, so PSEO and College in the Schools. We run the English language program. We're a degree granting college, both at the undergraduate and graduate level, and then a lot of non-credit professional development, and finally the Osier Lifelong Learning Institute. So for seniors who enjoy learning. So we work with students all the way from juniors in high school till through their retirement. So nice to meet many of you. Many of you I already know, but thanks for having me here.
Thanks, Bob. I appreciate that too. So of course, our best wishes to both of you as you embark on these new chapters. Okay. The next item is recognition of the recipients of the Vicki R. Courtney Award for Outstanding Service to the University Senate Governance. So I'm going to call on Professor Rachna Shah to present this item. Rachna.
Thank you, President Gable. My name is Professor Rachna Shah, Department of Supply Chain and Operations at Carlson School of Management. I also serve as the Senate Clerk. Please join me in congratulating the 2023 recipients of the Vicki R. Courtney Award for outstanding service to University Senate Governance. This year, we have Lynette Renner, Professor and Director of the PhD Program and Graduate Studies, School of Social Work, and Adam Sikla, PhD candidate, College of Biological Sciences. The Vicki Courtney Award for Outstanding Service to University Senate Governance recognizes faculty, academic, professional, and administrative staff, civil staff, and students system-wide who have made a significant impact on University Senate governance and have demonstrated a commitment to collaboration in University Senate governance and have served as an inspiration to others. Recipients receive a one-time $1,000 stipend and an engraved plaque. Thank you, Lynette and Adam, for your dedication to University Senate governance. Thank you also to the 2023 Selection Committee, Etty DeVoe, Ned Patterson, Madeline Rowe, and Carmen Sims. Please join in congratulating the two recipients. Adam and Lynette are both here. So Adam, if you want to say a word or two, and Lynette, the same for you.
Yes, thank you everyone so much. I really appreciate this nomination and ultimately getting this award. I've been very happy to serve all of you and the entire university community for the past 4 years, and hope that many others follow suit moving forward from here. I can't thank you all enough for this recognition.
Lynette?
Yeah, thank you also. I'm very honored to have been selected for this award. I've always admired Vicki for her leadership to the University Senate and her deep commitment to shared governance. So having a recognition in her name truly means a lot to me. I want to thank Dr. Joe Marighi for nominating me. and to thank Carrie Ryan Gallia, Sharon Diezik, Tim Pramus, and Katie Koopmeiners for their joint letter of support. And Adam, congratulations to you as well.
Yeah, thank you both.
Thank you, Rachna, and thank you both, and congratulations. Okay, so the next item is my report. So I'll just launch right in. So hello again, everybody. As we gather for the last University Senate meeting of the year, it's also my last meeting and last chance to preside over the Senate at the University of Minnesota. So I have updates for you, some, but I do want to address my recent announcement and reflect a little bit, just a little bit on these last 4 years, which have been amazing and intense and all the things, right, that we've all experienced in this unexpected time that we've all gone through together in our own ways. But I do want you to know that I regularly say to all of you, but I also say very regularly outside of our tiles on the Zoom screen or back when we were in person, that this is the best, most functional, most productive shared governance I've ever been a part of. And that's, I think, a very nice thing to say, and an incredible testament to all of you, and also to our Senate office, Vicki's legacy, and now Erin's leadership and the whole team. But it's also because of the people. It's like referring to the institution like it has a brain, when in fact the institution is the people who make it up. And those of you who've stepped up to serve in this way, and the way in which you've represented your constituencies, has been a tremendous honor for me. And I think collectively we've navigated some incredibly challenging times in the first couple of years. And we've also gotten some really amazing things done that we would not have gotten done under any other circumstance in any other way, despite all of the headwinds facing higher education and all the headwinds we were facing here. I have loved living in Minnesota and loved this institution. I moved my aged father here. This is where my kids come to visit. And I'm still just sort of so impressed, with who we are and what we do and how well we do it. And I think of all the things that we couldn't have foreseen, there were still so many things that we hoped for and then ultimately were able to do. And I want to extend my appreciation to you for that. The governance and staff leaders that I've worked with through University Senate, the different Senate leaders over these years have been all amazing. The staff in the office have been incredible, are super competent and very committed. And as a result, I know all of us who've been at other institutions, when we have this meeting on our calendar, often come to it with a certain set of emotions. And I look forward to these meetings. I feel like we pass along a lot of information, we get a lot done, we make decisions, and we move the institution forward. The Daily asked me what I thought my greatest achievement was, which I thought was a sort of strange way to answer the question, because really, if I'm doing the job right, I don't have any achievements at all. I'm supposed to recede. And I was sort of surprised. One of the surprises coming here is how impossible that is for the person in this role. But we as a community developed a strategic plan. And I know not everyone likes or agrees with the strategic planning process. I have mixed feelings about it myself, to be perfectly honest, despite my sort of unending advocacy and discussion of it. But I do think when you have a good one, it's helpful in three very specific ways. When we are the large, complex institution that we are, filled with expertise and innovation and artistry and discovery and success, it's very difficult to describe to the outside world or to stakeholders or to legislators or donors or even our own board sometimes what it is that we do without almost falling into this, what can feel to someone who doesn't understand us like a morass of all the different expertise that we have. But we're not a morass. We do incredible things in lots of different ways. And a well-designed strategic plan gives you the vocabulary to talk about that at 100,000 feet, so that as you understand where someone's interests may lie or where someone's advocacy may lie, then you can peel back the layers and get to it. And I feel like our strategic plan does that. It gives you a transparent way to talk about what the university is doing and not doing. We have all of that up now. We prepare that in annual reports. We make it publicly available. That never existed before. And hopefully, on occasion, it provides a little inspiration because you're able to see this aggregated success of the institution. We all know what we're working on, but we often don't know in our worlds what that is building into in any kind of aggregated way. And if you set the plan up to reflect the strength of the community, then you can see it in a tangible, discussable, digestible way. And I feel like this plan does that too. But it also gave us targets and things that we felt like the university needed to get done. And it was very specifically not intended to encroach or chill any of the individual creativity of all the faculty, staff, and students here, but to really think about what happens if everyone is doing well, what that means in the aggregate for the institution. And I just want to rattle off a few things for you because I want to remind you as we get to the end of the academic year where we are now as this strategic plan actually starts to wind down, believe it or not, and the next president will have the chance to write their own. So we have record applications for this institution. We have the last two classes, which would be the two classes that entered after the pandemic, are of record size. And the most recent class that we welcomed is the most diverse ever. And of the students who now join us in these large numbers, we have record high graduation rates. So we are meeting their needs and allowing them to progress successfully. I'm referring specifically to undergraduate students, just to be clear. The philanthropy is way up. We closed our campaign at 10% above goal, that goal being $4 billion. So we closed at 4.4 and we closed early. So I had the last third of the campaign. President Brunix had a little bit of the beginning, and most of the quiet phase and the beginning of the public phase was President Kaler. So that was a team sport with all of you and the good work that donors want to support, and a lot of being out there and waving the flag and talking about the good work. But a $4.4 billion campaign, I just want to make sure everybody knows the context. It puts us in a group of about 10 institutions in the whole country who are able to achieve at that level, draw support at that level. And we did that. A big part of that philanthropy supports students directly in the form of scholarship support or support for the services we provide. And as a result of a combination of programs, effort, and philanthropic support, all of our student debt is trending way below the national average, and more than 40% of our students graduate with no debt at all. We made sure that when we were thinking about that kind of student support, that we targeted it to those students who need it most. So we created the Promise program, which guarantees tuition for students whose family income level is below a certain threshold. And then as a reckoning of our complicated history, we raised that threshold for Native American students from Minnesota. Administrative overhead is down. I know there is a lot of concern about the PEAK program, and I will speak to it from my point of view, and with no way diminishing that change is hard and uncertainty breeds all of the emotions that one feels in an uncertain time. But we've actually had PEAK going for quite some time now. We've been talking about this for a while. And as a result of those efforts, the administrative overhead of the institution has gone from 11.6% of operating budget to 10.8%, almost a full percent, which may not sound like much, but remember, we're a $4.2 billion enterprise. A percent is a lot of money. And that was not based on layoffs. We have not done layoffs. It's not a layoff program. It's an effort to find ways to do what we do in the back room without redundancy and in ways that create professional streams for the people who do that work with consistency from unit to unit so that they can serve themselves and their own professional aspirations and the institution better. It's not perfect. It needs more consultation, but I want you to understand what it is. So, or at least what it is, where it is now and what it has the potential to do for us. We launched some new programs that were called for under the strategic plan. Next Gen Med is a partnership between the Rochester campus, the Mayo Clinic, and Google, that creates a College in 3, which is the national effort program, where students are interning at the Mayo Clinic paid while taking classes through a proprietary Google platform and able to complete their degree as a result in actually 2.5 years, with 2.5 years of paid experience at the Mayo Clinic. And now we're scaling that program. We've launched Next Gen Ag in partnership with Land O'Lakes and CHS, and we have other next gen programs in the pipeline. That idea and how to do that was the thinnest of silver linings amidst the chaos of the immediate adoption we had to have of technology during the pandemic. But there were good things that came from it, with in no way intending to diminish that it also was an incredibly difficult time. But we're starting to see how it drove creativity on this campus and in ways that were specifically called for in the strategic plan. We've had an incredible revitalization of our relationship with the Native American nations in the state of Minnesota. And that doesn't mean that everything in that relationship is easy, and it doesn't change the fact that we have an incredibly complicated past, but it means that we're openly acknowledging that past and working with those nations in very active, structured ways that they have requested in order to do what we can to address our history and build a foundation for the future together. And as a result of a lot of this work, we have a whole new set of research initiatives. We have the Native American Promise Program. We have record applications from Native American students on all of our campuses. And we have a type of engagement with the 11 nations here that we've never had before. Gives me real optimism about what that means in addressing things like the Truth Report in ways that can be meaningful and productive, and not just that the report and the pain associated with creating that report just has it ending up in the back of a file drawer somewhere. We've launched the Innovation Corridor and East Gateway project. So one of the things that I say often when I speak publicly nationally about the University of Minnesota is I talk about our commitment to students and the quality of our research, but I also talk about how one of our competitive distinctions is that we sit within a metro that is also a headquartered economy of multiple Fortune 500 companies, many of which were founded and created by innovations and technologies that came from the University of Minnesota. And that's a pretty good neighborhood for a research university to be in, a university that's committed to its community, a university that's committed to the arts, that's committed to social sciences. And one of the things we've been lacking that many of our peers who have similar circumstances have done is a really robust co-location opportunity so that their creativity and our creativity can create something greater than the sum of its parts. And so over the course of several years, the foundation and the university have been acquiring the land in between McNamara and I-94 to build out this co-location space that we've been calling East Gateway, but they're going to give it a new name. And they're ready to scoop dirt on this program. And this will include innovation spaces, lab spaces, living spaces, and then also just expand our footprint for the things we like offices and classrooms and coffee shops and life in that direction, connecting the campus in this new direction. And the last thing I'll bring up, I could say a lot of stuff about sports, but I'll spare. Sports have been good here. But one of the things I do want to talk about is rankings, because I know rankings are, we all know the two-sided coin of rankings, but we do use them in order to benchmark. And there are some that are actually really quite useful for us. We're part of the Sustainable Development Goals, which are ranked. We look at the global rankings. We do look at US News, but also we look program by program at their rankings. And every single ranking that we have is up. The university is back into the top 25 publics for the first time in 15 years. Medicine leapfrogged the Mayo Clinic in the Blue Ridge rankings to land at number 21. Nursing is at number 14. We are in the top group in the SDGs in the very first year that we entered those rankings, and we'll go up this year. And we have a multitude of program level rankings that are still embargoed by US News, but trust me when I say the news is good. So there's a lot of noise. There are cultural attributes to that noise that I don't know that I've ever fully understood, and maybe I never will. But the reality is, the truth is that this community has been of very high achievement in all of the most important ways on behalf of our students, on behalf of our faculty and staff, on behalf of the communities that we serve, and on behalf of ourselves as individuals who are creative, productive, individual human beings who need well-being and a sense of community and involvement. And that does not mean that there isn't more work to do. There's plenty of batons for me to pass to the next president, but I want you to trust and feel optimism in the momentum of the institution. And I hope some pride in the kind of place where you have associated yourself. I certainly feel incredibly proud to have been a part of this community for these years. And I thank you very much for that. So with that, I'll give you some updates. So first, I want to give you some leadership search updates. We have 3 important searches still underway this year, and we have a few that are going to emerge next year, some of which the provost will talk to you about. As part of the leadership transition, the Board of Regents is having extended meetings to go really line by line through everything in a very fulsome way, including the status of these searches. The one that is sort of the hanging chad, if you will, is the Morris Chancellor search. So at the last board meeting, because those finalists were on campus in Morris, gosh, a month ago, which is obviously a very long time ago in this world. Take it from me, waiting that long to hear is horrible. And so we have advocated strongly to move that one to the top of the list, and they have. And so the board decided to allow us to continue with extending an offer. We're now negotiating with a finalist. We expect to be able to make a public announcement about this in the next few days. So I thank everyone very much for their patience on that. We are also prepared to kick off the search for university relations, Matt Kramer's job. The board wants to hold and have the interim president do that, but everything is ready so that when the interim president arrives, that search can be launched immediately. And our vice president for university services, we should be bringing an appointment to the board for their approval. Myron Franz will bring that appointment forward in May. On grad student unionization, this week, the grad assistants across our system are voting. And for those who aren't here in the Twin Cities or Duluth, there's mail-in balloting. I want to be really clear, and this is not tied to me, this is the administration, is committed to supporting our graduate assistants, supervisors, advisors, faculty. We believe in the shared governance of this, and we will work with our grad students in the way that they choose to work with us. And we're going to meet our students where they are. We are going to provide information as the process unfolds so that people understand what's going on, the timing, that you can expect that the general counsel's office will send information out indicating what you can or can't do. My hope is that that information will be phrased and received in a way that reflects the operational nature of what's happening and not give the impression of any opinion. Our opinion is that the grad students can decide for themselves what they want to do, and we will meet the grad students where they are. So we expect the results of that election as maybe even as early as tomorrow, certainly by next week, and we'll follow up with more information once that election is concluded. Legislative update. So House and Senate have both passed their higher ed omnibus bills, and I know Bob and Donna can give us a legislative update probably better than I can, but those bills are now headed to conference committee to reconcile differences before we would see what ultimately passes. We are very active over in St. Paul right now. Lots of different voices rallying for our budget request. And then in parallel, they're not competing with each other, but of course the timing, they're happening at the same time, is the rallying for the support of the university's needs vis-a-vis the M Health Fairview and Sanford potential, well, the Fairview and Sanford potential merger and the implications. 2 different teams working on those 2 different components, largely different legislators, although eventually it gets to legislative leadership, and that's one small group of people. So there's still more to learn and see unfold in that space. Also, we are awaiting the legislature's decision to call the election for the 4 region seats that are open. I've heard the same rumors you have. I am not involved in that process. There were multiple, it's happening today, and then obviously it didn't happen. I've heard rumors that it may happen early next week. they're rumors. So we are very hopeful, though, that we will know who the new regents are soon, because there's a lot of decision making that we need in the very near future. There were still some changes in the board that you may have heard about. Ken Powell, who served as chair since 2019 and was the vice chair when I arrived, resigned his board leadership position earlier this month. He is still on the board. The bylaws of the Board of Regents have the vice chair move up. And so she is now appointed as the chair of the board for the remainder of this term, which goes until June of 2023, at which point that board, in whatever composition it is, will elect their officers. The regents have held 2 extended special meetings to discuss my transition and the transition to an interim. And then they also voted new vice chairs since Janie Mayron moved up, and they did something a historic decision, which was to have 2 vice chairs, Doug Hipsch and Mike Kenyanya. This team now, Janie Mayron, Doug Hipsch, and Mike Kenyanya, will be in place until June. And then in June, the Board of Regents will re-elect permanent leaders, or at least leaders for the next term, which is 2 years. Another thing the board decided is that we're going to lease East Cliff to Governor Walz during the presidential transition. Although I will say it does mean I have to get out a little earlier than I thought. So, these things are fine. We're going to work with it. And I'm very glad to know that East Cliff can be used. It's a really amazing, if you haven't been in the house, it's an amazing house and an amazing piece of the culture of the campus. And so I'm delighted that there's this purpose for it going into the future. And then we will have a regular old board meeting of the regents on May 11th and 12th with a full agenda in mission fulfillment and finance. And then on Friday, during the full board, we will do P&T and the annual recognitions for McKnight Awards, National Academy inductees, national scholarships. And we will provide an update on PRISM, the Student Mental Health Initiative, which is finishing its 2nd of 3 years. And they've made a lot of progress. I very much encourage you to watch that. And both Next Gen programs, Next Gen Med and Next Gen Ag, will make presentations to the board with updates there. And so that concludes my report. I didn't receive any questions in advance, but I'm happy to take questions from the floor. Any questions? Okay, thank you all very much. Our next item is the Provost's report. Rachel?
Thank you, President Gabel, and thank you to everybody. Good afternoon. I've got 4 kind of main comments, some of which yield off of what President Gabel mentioned. So she talked about searches in her office. We also have a number of dean and other searches. So we still have active 3 dean searches, the Dean of the College of Biological Sciences, the Dean of the College of Design, and the Dean of the School of Public Health. We also have 2 vice provost searches active, the Office for Public Engagement and Global Programs and Strategy Alliance. So the hope is those will conclude over the early summer and that individuals will be starting in the midsummer or late fall for those positions. We also, as you've heard, will have transitions in the Dean of the Law School and the Dean of the College of Liberal Arts. My intention is to appoint interims for a year for each of those positions. I believe the interim law announcement went out today, and I'm just making the call for nominations for the interim of the College of Liberal Arts, and then we will launch full-scale national searches next year for those deans. The second topic I wanted to mention is around ChatGPT and other AI tools. So you're going to hear a little bit from the Senate Committee on Academic Integrity, but some of you might have seen my message earlier today. So I'm very grateful for Tom Chase and SCEP, who developed some language, some syllabus language around the use of ChatGPT and AI tools for faculty to consider integrating into their syllabi for this summer and next fall. There were options that they provided all the way from you may not use ChatGPT to may use it for some things and not others to you may use it not at all. And the idea is for each instructor, based on their own learning goals, based on their own pedagogy and assessment tools to identify what would be best for their classes. We don't have any restrictions on what individual faculty can, interested instructors can or should do. The only requirement is that whatever one decides, one needs to communicate it to your students so that they know what's permitted and what's not permitted. I also suggested in that message that instructors might consider adopting and communicating some of that language for their final exams coming up in a few weeks. Again, so that students know what's in scope and what's out of scope, and that we don't have academic integrity surprises. So the third topic I wanted to mention is the just an update on our deliberations around our vaccine mandate. So as you may have heard, our public health and medical experts, who we've relied on throughout the pandemic, are now recommending that we sunset the policy that requires vaccination for employees, and that we stop requiring the COVID-19 vaccination for our students. So I've been engaged in consultations along with Jill DeBoer and some medical school experts with the CSCC, with the FCC, with the SSCC, and with the PACC. We're also meeting next week with the Crookston and Duluth faculty, who are not represented on many of those committees, but are nonetheless important constituents, to hear their feedback and concerns. The intention based on that feedback is that this proposal would go to the President's Policy Committee. If that committee approves the proposal, then the decision would be open for a 30-day comment period. So that would launch a 30-day open comment period. So I want to encourage you and your constituents to submit comments during that 30-day period. At the end of that 30-day period, the Presidential Policy Committee reviews those comments and then makes a recommendation to the President about what to do moving forward. So that comment period, given that we're meeting with Duluth and Crookston next week, I'm thinking it's probably early the week after that the President's Policy Committee would have its meeting, and that would launch the 30-day comment period. The final update I want to offer is around commencement. We're all really looking forward to this commencement. We know it's not our usual MO, and it's going to be a little different, big conferral ceremonies, small stage crossings, but we think it's going to be really exciting. As you might have seen in the announcement, our graduate ceremony, conferral ceremony, our guest speaker is Lieutenant Governor Peggy Flanagan. And for our undergraduate conferral ceremony, our guest speaker is the CEO of Moderna, Stefan Bancel, who happens to be one of our alums. He has a master's degree from the College of Science and Engineering. So we're very excited for those celebrations. There will be a lot of people on campus, but we also welcome all of our faculty to participate in the ceremonies. There is a processional and a role for you. So if you want to participate, reach out to your commencement coordinator, and we'd be delighted to have you. And we hope that there will be a great turnout and a wonderful celebratory experience, and no rain. We're all hoping for no rain. So with that, I'll stop. And as with President Gabel, I didn't get any questions in advance, but I'm happy to take them from the floor.
Any questions for the provost? Okay, thank you, Rachel. All right, next up is the SCC report. I'll call on Professor Flaherty Manchester to give this report. Colleen?
Thank you, President Gabel. So the most recent action I wanted to report to the senators from our committee is a letter that we sent to the Board of Regents that highlighted the committee's perspectives on the process and the priorities, which implies like characteristics and experiences for the interim president. So following President Gabel's announced resignation and then the realization that there's no formal board policy for interim president appointments, many stakeholders began to weigh in on their values for that position. And so the SCC leadership, which is Mark B. and myself, were able to connect with the Board of Regents leadership at the time, but the committee thought it was really important that it weighed in terms of the shared governance perspective and that voice, and really sent that to the full board membership. So in the letter, we highlighted the importance of transparency, inclusivity, kind of deliberate consideration, communication in terms of process. And then we also highlighted the importance of experience in the tripart mission of the university, dedication to academic freedom, and commitment to shared governance, among other priorities. And the letter you can access via the Senate website. And then when we were listening to the Special Board of Regents meetings, we definitely heard the themes of our letter reflected. And we also saw in the position description, which you can also access via the board website, a statement that basically says, understanding of academia and the role and value of shared governance within a complex organization. So we felt that our letter had an impact on that position description and process. In terms of other action, the SCC also referred an item to the Senate Campus Safety Committee recently. So over the past year, the SCC has observed in public forums around safety, as well as the Strategic Advisory Committee in those meetings, this question of whether or not racial description should be included in safe notifications. This is the current practice of our Department of Public Safety, is to not include those descriptions, and that practice was instituted under President Kaler and has continued under President Gabel. This is a practice and it's not a formal codified policy. So what the SCC has requested is that the Campus Safety Committee review and discuss whether or not this current practice is best practice, and if so, whether or not it should become a formal policy. And so the expectation would be that committee would take up that topic starting in the fall. As a committee, we also heard from Myron Franz, Senior Vice President of Finance and Operations, as well as Dean Jacob Tolar, who is also Vice President of Clinical Affairs, about the hospital funding proposal, as well as updates from Laura Fierro and Mary Roman Cool from OHR on the updates for measuring the effectiveness of the well-being program. So, and then just to conclude, in short order, you'll be asked to vote on the workforce reinvestment resolution, which is co-sponsored by leaders of the civil service, faculty, P&A, and student consultative committees. And I just want to highlight that in my comments as chair now, because it does reflect the priority that we set out in terms of investing in university employees that we communicated to you as senators at the very start of the academic year in our first meeting in September. So with that, I would conclude my report.
Okay, thank you, Colleen. So as foreshadowed, the next item is a discussion and vote on the workforce reinvestment resolution. I'll again call on Colleen Flaherty Manchester to present this item.
Great, and I think Amber is going to share some slides. All right, thank you, Amber. Okay, so hello again. As you know, I'm the chair of the SCC and the FCC, and I'm a professor in the Carlson School of Management, and I'm here today to present and reintroduce, I guess, the workforce reinvestment resolution called Rebuilding a Better You for Employees back to the University Senate, and this time for a vote. Next slide, please. So just as a review, this is going to be a high-level presentation, but just to remind us about this resolution. A central motivation of the resolution is to elevate the importance of investing in employees as a center, kind of the centerpiece of the U's ability to maintain and enhance its delivery on the three-part mission. Next slide. So we're excited to be here to show you this resolution again and have it for a vote. I'm speaking on behalf of my vice chair, Mark B., as well as the other co-sponsors of this resolution, who are the chairs and vice chairs of the consultative committees of the Civil Service, P&A, and Student Senates. Next slide. So something we want to emphasize as co-sponsors is really the collective effort behind this resolution. As the idea of the resolution took shape, there was really an explicit decision by the consultative committee leadership to co-sponsor this resolution in order to bring together the employee voices and to elevate that in terms of the importance of workforce investment across our employee groups as well as across the system. And as leaders, we saw commonalities and overlap in what we were hearing from our constituents in terms of the challenges and opportunities. And at the same time, we also acknowledged that there were some distinct needs across different employee groups, and you'll see those aspects reflected in the resolution. So for our consultative committees, this has really been building off years of listening efforts, as well as in more intense consultation that we'd had the first part of this year leading up to when we first presented the resolution to the Senate last time. It's also critical to acknowledge the early and ongoing support from President Gabel and really looking to shared governance to identify these opportunities for reinvigorating the employment relationship at the U. And so if this resolution is passed, we will also be looking to the interim president and beyond for the response and the implementation planning. Next slide. So just as a high-level overview, what the resolution is asking for is for the administration to make near-term investments as well as formulate a longer-term workforce investment plan that's grounded in the following principles, which are listed on the slide. So the first is around salary compensation. The second is more around workplace conditions and benefits. The third is around career development and pathways. And then the fourth is around the culture of how work gets done and the importance of having manageable workloads. Next slide. So I'm not going to go through all the different priorities today just because we have limited time, but just so we know that these principles are kind of what we see as kind of goals and objectives, and then the priorities, which are listed underneath each principle, are like, you can think of them as like the mechanisms, or these are the specific investments that we think are important in order to kind of realize the principles that we set forth. Next slide. And so the ask to administration is to respond in terms of the expected timeframes for addressing these different priorities. So the resolution requests that the administration respond with timeframes in terms of, for those priorities that are identified as feasible in the immediate or near term, the resolution requests that action is taken as soon as possible. For those priorities that are identified as requiring longer term strategic planning, the resolution requests that the administration formalize a longer term workforce strategic plan that will have commitments and goals that reflect the principles and priorities, as well as include metrics for assessing the plan's progress towards achieving those goals. And then for those priorities that are deemed kind of off the table, even in the longer run or long term, the resolution requests that administration responds with the rationale for that conclusion. Next slide. The second component of the ask reflects kind of the starting point of the resolution, which is really to make employees kind of central or more central in terms of their elevated importance to mission delivery. So it's asking administration to identify ways to institutionalize this workforce priority in its practices, such as around the budgeting practices and having increased role of shared governance leaders in those processes, and also really elevating the importance of the workforce in its communication with the Board of Regents and with the constituents like the Senate and House and the Governor's Office in terms of the workforce's keys, the university workforce's key role in the delivery on the missions. Next slide. I just want to acknowledge just some parts of the resolution. We kind of acknowledge it's not perfect, but we do see it reflecting the principles and priorities, really reflecting kind of aspects that have received broad support and are likely to have broad impact across the system. It also acknowledges that there's already ongoing effort on these priorities, and really the idea is with this resolution to bring increased attention and resources to those efforts. The resolution itself is quite long, has a lot of footnotes. A lot of that is just to help provide context for the different priorities. The resolution also acknowledges the decentralized nature of our budgeting and encourages administration to incentivize the units to make decisions that align with the principles and priorities. And then finally, we can view implementation as an opportunity to partner with administration, including the interim president as well as beyond, and thinking how this resolution could help inform and provide guideposts for our search for the next president. Next slide. All right, so that's the overview. Today, we have a few limited time for any remaining questions or comments, and then we'll be opening up for a vote. Okay,
Any questions? Discussion? Okay, Chris, would you initiate the poll?
We'll give about 10 more seconds if you wish to vote. And last call. There being 132 ayes, 0 nays, and 8 abstentions, that motion prevails.
Okay, congratulations and thank you to everyone involved in this really important effort. So our next item is a statement from the Student Academic Integrity Committee and is presented for information. The next item concerns next year's meeting dates and is also presented for information. Just to note into the record, the University and Faculty Senates will meet on the following dates next year: September 28th, November 2nd, November 30th, and then into 2024 on February 22nd, March 28th, and April 25th. The next item is old business. There is no old business. And so the next item is new business. Please note that any new business will be referred to committee unless special permission is granted by 2/3 of those voting present. Is there any new business? Yes, Colleen.
This new business item is just to take a moment for the Senate to thank you for your leadership and your time at the university. So I guess the new business is to people to use their Zoom reactions to thank you or use the chat to praise you. So appreciate your partnership.
Thank you all very much. I really appreciate it. Thank you. Is there any other new business? Thank you all very much. You make me get weepy during a Senate meeting. It's such a bad look. All right, seeing none, I will call for a motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, sorry. Chris, if you could initiate the poll.
We'll give about 10 more seconds if you wish to vote. And last call. There being 145 ayes, 1 nay, and 1 abstention, that motion prevails.
Okay, thank you all very much. We will have Faculty Senate beginning at 4:15. Good afternoon, everybody. It's my pleasure to call the Faculty Senate to order. Our first item of business is a motion to approve a special rule limiting each speaker to 2 minutes each time they're recognized. A 2/3 majority of those present and voting is required to approve the special rule. Is there any discussion? Okay, Chris, if you could initiate the poll.
I'll give it about 10 more seconds if you wish to vote. And last call. There being 74 ayes and 0 nays, 0 abstentions, that motion prevails.
Okay, thanks, everybody. Next item concerns administrative responses to the Faculty Senate and is presented for information, but at this time, there are no responses pending. Next item is approval of the minutes from the Faculty Senate meeting of March 30th, 2023. There's no motion or second needed for this. So Chris, if you could initiate the poll on the approval of the minutes.
You have about 10 more seconds if you wish to vote. And last call. There being 69 ayes, 0 nays, and 2 abstentions, that motion prevails.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. The next item is the FCC report. So I'll call on Professor Flaherty Manchester to give this report.
Great. Thank you, President Gable. So just before I get into my report, I just want to let you all know that the Faculty Senate officer slate, which includes the vice chair of the Senate, the clerk, and the parliamentarian, that slate was not ready for the meeting today. And so we'll be sending out an electronic vote for you when the names are finalized. So I just want to thank you in advance for your attention to that email and to that electronic vote. Okay, so in terms of my report, with this being the last Senate meeting of the academic year, I wanted to take us back to the fall, where I shared the FCC priorities for 22-23. So really after a lot of listening in the 21-22 academic year, the FCC established the priorities of first, faculty reinvestment, second, elevating the concerns of fixed-term faculty, and third, increasing the effectiveness of the FCC with respect to our charge, along with showing the value of faculty governance. So where are we at with those priorities? So for faculty reinvestment, Mark B. and I joined the other consultative committee leaders in drafting the resolution that you've heard about called Workforce Reinvestment, which just passed the University Senate resoundingly. So each of the priorities kind of within that resolution could have been a separate resolution on its own to one of the different constituent senates or to the University Senate as a whole. But, by banding together and collaborating across the different consultative committees, we feel like we're being able to elevate the commonalities across employee groups as well as the need for that employee investment. So in terms of next steps, and with the imminent presidential change, just want to let you know that under my leadership in FCC, as well as the transition to Mark B on July 1, who's been a fantastic and impressive vice chair for this year, the FCC is committed to continuing to emphasize those priorities and is keen on collaborating with administration, including the interim president, as well as looking ahead for shaping the description and input for the new president. So for our second priority, fixed-term faculty, the resolution that was passed this fall, actually coming from the Senate Committee on Academic Freedom and Tenure, there's now a task force being established to study the use of term faculty and faculty-like P&A employees, as well as their academic freedom coverage and protections. So that's underway in terms of the task force creation. And in addition, there are aspects of the workforce reinvestment resolution that had priorities specifically targeted towards these term faculty and faculty-like P&A. So I think we've made some real progress there. In addition, Mark and I are planning to check in with the leadership of the new subcommittee that's focusing on these issues, which is kind of a subcommittee of the Faculty Senate Committee on faculty affairs. And so just wanting to take stock on how that first year went for that subcommittee. And then for our last priority, closely examining the FCC and its charge, with respect to what we're trying to do, we are actually representing faculty from across the system. So the FCC got out of its virtual meeting room and took a trip to Morris, and we were really excited to be there. We learned a lot about the campus, the concerns of faculty there, and just really got to see firsthand all the great assets that the university has in that campus. So this visit to Morris, I think, is part of what we're trying to do in terms of approaching the committee's impact by enhancing its accessibility and visibility. So that overall concludes my report. I'm available for questions for the session, and I'll do my best to answer the questions during the time today. And if not, I'll follow up. Back
Any
to you,
questions
President
for
Gable.
Colleen?
Yeah.
Sorry. Okay, thank you, Colleen. Very much appreciate the report and the tie back. The next item is a report of the faculty legislative liaisons, and Rob Blair is going to present for us. And I think we have Rob, about what's happening Monday. Are you going to start with that? Okay, first you're muted, and since you don't know, I'll go ahead and say it. So while we were in our earlier University Senate meeting, the legislature noticed the regent election will happen on Monday. They sent out the notice.
Oh, I had not heard that.
So there you go. Yeah.
That's kind of exciting.
First, folks. Yes, it is exciting.
Okay.
So the floor is yours.
All righty. So just to give you a little bit of an update, if you're at the previous portion of the meeting, you actually already heard all of this. This is a year where we focus on budget at the Capitol, and this is kind of a tally card of a current budget requests relative what the university asked and what different budgets have proposed. Right now, we're going into conference committee where the House and Senate take their two different versions and hammer it out in a small group of 6 people. And you can see the House is more generous than the Senate. If you look at the whatever column of this chart here, and we're hoping that members of the House prevail. Earlier today, I told a group that we would be contacting you if you were in, that we had contacted you if you were in one of the districts of the people in the conference committee. We haven't done that yet. So, but unfortunately, only a couple of the people are Twin Cities based districts. So many of you won't receive any emails saying, hey, if you want to contact your legislator, please do so, and this would be a good time. If we stay with the Senate version, there's going to be some belt tightening around the university next year, and I'll just leave it at that. So one thing I want to advocate for you is to become an advocate. It's an easy thing to do. You go to the UMN advocates page, you go to the bottom and you hit join UMN advocates, and that will basically put you in a database where we will contact you specifically if you're faculty about faculty issues that are coming up or important, as well as general issues concerning the university. If you don't want to be looped into, and the number of emails you receive, maybe one a month, not even that. If you just want to be independent on your own, you can scroll to the bottom of the page, find your legislator, because many of you, including me, I didn't know who my new senator was, can find your legislator, and things that we like to say is tell your story, make it personal. It's much better to speak about how things affect you in your office, in your teaching, in your research, rather than to try and argue with numbers. And be positive and courteous. Don't go on a rampage. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing and turn it back to you.
Okay. Any questions about what's happening for me or Rob? Mostly for Rob. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you very much. All right. Our next item is our effort to seek approval of the Twin Cities slate of candidates for the FCC. I'm going to call on Professor Ned Patterson to present this item. And I'll note that this is with indulgence for the Twin Cities faculty senators only. So obviously everyone's invited to listen, but the vote will be in Twin Cities. So Ned?
Thank you, President Gable. I just wanted to present a few things from this item, and most of it's in the materials. From the second paragraph in the comments, I'm chair of the FCC nominating committee in addition to being on FCC. The nominating subcommittee is required to nominate twice as many candidates as are to be elected, with 3 elected positions to fill this year than we've nominated 6. In this process, we solicited self or other nominations from all eligible faculty in the Twin Cities and took additional nominations from faculty colleagues and the FCC nominating committee members and came up with this proposed election slate of 3 pairs of 2 for 6 candidates for 3 spots. And as in many previous years, these are paired in order to, we believe, to achieve balanced representation across the Twin Cities campus among family groups, taking into account the current and recent composition of FCC-based and ex officio and elected members. Even though we represent all faculty, we want to make sure we hear from a broad range of faculty representation in this. And I think that's all I have. And so then that's the motion to approve the slate. And then if approved, once approved, then it will be sent out for an electronic ballot.
Okay, so this type of motion does not have question or discussions. So with that presentation, I'll ask Chris to initiate the poll.
You have about 10 more seconds if you wish to vote. One last call. There being 71 ayes, 0 nays, and 3 abstentions, that motion prevails.
Thanks, everybody, and congratulations to our new slate. And thank you for your willingness to serve. All right, the next item is a discussion of and vote on proposed revisions to faculty senate rules. I'm going to call on Professor Flaherty Manchester to bring us back up to speed on this proposal.
Great, thanks, President Gable. I think Amber's going to share her screen. Maybe she already is, and you can't see it. There it goes. Okay. All right, so this is just coming back to us. So it's a really short overview. As I mentioned last time, there are a series of amendments, constitution, bylaws, and rules that are going to be before the body. But given we're at the end of the academic year, we wanted to just start with the rules because that has the lowest threshold for approval. And then in the fall, the body will see the Constitution amendments, the bylaws amendments, and they're very much in the same flavor of what you saw if you were in the University Senate this year. Okay, so for today, the notable changes are for the rules around the 2-minute rule, making it a permanent thing, adding language to keep up with our practice of electronic meetings and voting, and then some other aspects for really just kind of aligning with practice and then removing some redundancies. And so that is the vote on the table today, is approval of the rules. So next slide, please. So we'll be voting here today, and approval requires just a majority of those present and voting. All right. Any follow-up, since we've had this up once before, but is there any question or discussion? Okay, Chris, how about you initiate the poll?
Give about 10 more seconds if you wish to vote. And last call. There being 82 ayes, 0 nays, and 0 abstentions, that motion prevails.
Okay. Thank you all very much. All right. Our next item is a discussion and vote on a proposed new policy that I'm going to ask Vice Provost Bob McMaster to introduce and present, and then we'll have a brief discussion. Bob?
Just 1 second, let me find Vice Provost's name to unmute him.
Okay, we're still awaiting Bob's arrival. We were moving a little faster than expected, so I'll call on Katie to get us started until Bob gets here.
Sorry about that, Katie. You should be ready to go.
Okay, thank you. It wasn't allowing me to unmute myself, so I was listening. I will go ahead and start with sharing my screen if that's okay. All right, so you should all have access to the retroactive withdrawal policy, and hopefully you've had a chance to look at that. But I'll walk through a few slides so you can understand the policy, and happy to answer any questions you have. So we are here to talk about the retroactive withdrawal and academic restoration for undergraduate students proposed policy. This policy provides students with 2 pathways to return to the university after they've had some time here where they were struggling academically. The first pathway is the retroactive withdrawal pathway. Retroactive withdrawal is a current practice that's already in place, and it has never been put into policy. So our hope is to put this into policy for transparency to students. The elements on the slide that you see that are bolded to help distinguish them from academic restoration, so you can start to see how the 2 pathways are different. So students who have experienced extenuating circumstances will come back and petition to their college for a retroactive withdrawal. They provide documentation of their extenuating circumstances, and then if approved, a W is recorded on their transcript. Academic restoration provides a path to degree completion for students who left the university with an academic record that leaves them without a viable path to earning a degree and are returning to the university as a degree-seeking student. So if we're trying to think of an example, you can picture a student who is here, completed potentially a full year of courses and earned only F grades. That student leaves, pursues other opportunities, and eventually makes their way back to the institution. That alone doesn't necessarily mean academic restoration is the best option for them. If that student is returning and plans to pursue the same major they were interested in initially, more likely they'll be repeating courses, and our course repeat policy will allow them to bracket their initial attempt, and they'll be able to complete their degree and adjust their GPA in that manner. For students who want to come back, who have that full year of F grades and pursue a completely different major, what we currently essentially need to ask them to do is to spend time repeating courses that don't count toward their major, taking that time and expense that perhaps they don't want to and might not be their best option. In the past, we've seen students opt to go to other institutions to complete a degree where their GPA won't follow them. So this policy would apply to that student, create an opportunity for them to come back, complete their University of Minnesota degree here as they had hoped to do. So when academic restoration is applied, the student's GPA will exclude D and F grades earned during the time period of 1 year, as opposed to retroactive withdrawal, where students will receive a W on their transcript. With academic restoration, the grades remain on the transcript and a notation is placed indicating that they were a candidate for restoration. So our eligibility criteria, they must be eligible for readmission to their intended college, have not taken U of M classes for a period of time, 5 years, have an intent to complete an undergraduate degree, lack a viable path to the U of M, to completing a U of M degree without restoration. And after meeting those criteria, we would ask them to complete a minimum of 12 AF credits and earn a GPA of 2.5 or higher. That those 12 credits can be completed in 1 semester or over a period of semesters. That's really up to the student. We're just asking them to demonstrate that they're prepared to return before being fully admitted and paying tuition. So sometimes it helps to, when thinking about academic restoration, to think about who it's not intended for, to contextualize it. Academic restoration is not intended for returning students with a GPA above or near 2.0. For returning students who wish to retake previous coursework and pursue the same major, or for students who are struggling academically due to extenuating circumstances, because those students would pursue retroactive withdrawal. We started consulting and shaping and forming this policy in September of 2021. So it's hard to believe it's almost been 2 years, but you can see all of the groups on the Twin Cities campus and across the system who've helped to shape the policy that's before you today for your consideration. We're really excited to be here after 2 years, and I'm eager to hear your questions. And I will stop sharing the screen.
Thanks, Katie. And Vice Provost McMaster is here now too. So we have a dream team to answer questions. Any questions or concerns? Discussion? Jonathan.
Hi, thanks. Hi, everyone. I really appreciate the idea behind this. What are the extenuating circumstances and how do you weigh various extenuating circumstances without getting into a really tricky, slippery slope situation where one student says, hey, that's not fair. Why are my extenuating circumstances not extenuating enough? Thanks.
Yeah, that's a great question. Examples of extenuating circumstances they range widely. So it's students who had an extenuating circumstances that impacted their ability to be successful in their courses, right? So it could be, I've seen students who were hit by a car. I think that's pretty extreme. Often we see mental health issues where students have struggled academically. And I think the piece where when you start talking about, hey, that's not fair, there is an accountability measure that comes with this. So when a student is receiving retroactive withdrawal, the college will say, like, we see you struggled with this challenge in this semester. We expect that you will be able to take some steps to address this issue so that you're not petitioning for retroactive withdrawal multiple semesters in a row for the same issue.
If you don't mind, I appreciate your response, but I don't find it adequately address my concern. I'm not worried about the student who got hit by a car or whose parent died. I'm worried about the other end of the spectrum. How do you ensure that these circumstances are bad enough, or who gets to decide that? I don't understand the process for who decides if one student's extenuating circumstances are bad enough. It doesn't seem fair to me that we would deny somebody based on some arbitrary cutoff for what's bad enough.
Yeah, there are collegiate scholastics committees that review these petitions and make decisions. And so members of those committees vary a little bit by college, but they typically include a faculty member or a director of undergraduate studies, and then advising leadership and academic advisors. In terms of making sure that students are aware of the opportunity to petition for retroactive withdrawal, that is typically, they learn about this sometimes from their peers, but more often from their academic advisors who see that they struggled. They might be being placed on probation. They might be just having a conversation with the student, and the student is saying, I'm not doing well this semester, and here are all the reasons why. And that's where the student is supported through the retroactive withdrawal process. Am I getting closer?
Yeah, I'll let others ask. I think my point's been made. Thanks.
Thanks, Jonathan. Carolyn?
Hi, looks like I am unmuted. Thank you for bringing forward this policy. I noticed that someone does not qualify unless they are out of the university for 5 years. Could you talk about why it's so long?
Yeah, I think, and that's really why we kind of pair this with, there's retroactive withdrawal. There are other ways for students to come back and recover. I think this is a big shift for our institution to go to just completely exclude grades. We're not asking them to demonstrate any form of extenuating circumstance. So the extenuating circumstance, if we were going to use that language, and it's probably not the best language, is time away. And the assumption that there is growth and development that happens during that time period. And we want to create a path for those students to come back to the institution. The number of 5 years was landed on after many conversations. There's no perfect or absolute right number, but numbers that were discussed were 3 years. Some people wanted longer with 10 years. There was a contingency of, well, maybe 3 years, but then they can't have taken any higher ed coursework anywhere. But there was discomfort with saying that a student can't be taking courses at a community college to kind of try things out. And so we landed on saying, you have to be away from the University of Minnesota for 5 years, but you could have gone elsewhere. But so that's kind of how we landed on 5 years. And this is where this is a new policy. And if we see a student who's been gone for 4.5 years and they're coming back, that everything is petitionable, right? And so we can look at those records and see what makes sense. But this is the best number we had at this point.
Okay, thank you. James?
Thank you very much. Thanks for, again, bringing up this important topic. I just want to follow up on that extenuating circumstances part. You mentioned mental health issues as a potential extenuating circumstance. I think that works well for people who are able to get into the DRC to get a letter of accommodation, but many students can't, or perhaps don't want to for a variety of reasons, possibly related to that very mental health issue. And so in those sorts of situations where people are struggling with mental health issues, is that an extenuating circumstance, or do you need to have a doctor's note to have that count?
Yeah, so I can speak to this I was an academic advisor years ago at this point and served on a scholastics committee, but I think that I can assume that there are some similar practices in place. So when we're talking about a student who's experiencing a mental health crisis, you don't have to petition right away. So sometimes it'll be a semester later when a student is in a place to come back and talk to their advisor. And then it may be during that time that they have received treatment or some sort of talk to a counselor, and then there's documentation in that way. Sometimes it happens that the student is coming in the midst and they're talking to their academic advisor, or right after, and they might even be able to provide documentation of, here's when I stopped attending my classes. So this is when something happened and I stopped attending my classes, and here are the steps that I'm taking to make sure that I am getting healthy and taking care of myself. So I think petitions can look differently depending on the student's situation and what they need. And I think our college, the colleagues in our college that are on scholastics committees care very deeply about students and want this to be equitable, the right choice for students, but also thinking about other students who are not receiving academic restoration. But it is a very thoughtful process.
Okay, Elizabeth, I think you're our last question.
Great. Yeah, I just want to echo what everyone else has said. Really appreciate a policy on this. It'll be really wonderful to have something more standardized rather than trying to deal with all the different student issues that come up on our own. My question really echoes what Carolyn asked about. The 5 years does seem like a very long time. I mean, many of our students are 20 years old, so that's, you know, a quarter of their lifetime. And I I kind of couple that with eligibility for readmission into the college that they're coming into. So if they have been away for 5 years, and they left with poor grades, I don't exactly understand, what that eligibility criteria is. So, rather than getting into a big discussion of it, I think it'd be a little bit better if it were perhaps a threshold that they can't return, or they can't do this until so many years and a little shorter than 5, and then being a little bit more specific about what you mean by readmission criteria. But
Okay.
thank you.
No, thank you for your feedback. And I'll just touch on the readmission piece that I think that is a little bit challenging to imagine that if you to be eligible for readmission, most often what we see is that students might be eligible for readmission to one college and not another. And sometimes that length of time changes the college perspective on that as well. But for example, a student might not be eligible for readmission to the College of Science and Engineering if they have not demonstrated their ability to be successful in science courses. But it might be that a college like the College of Liberal Arts would be interested in admitting them if they were now interested in a major like global studies, something completely different where they're using other skills.
Okay, and Emily, now you're our last question.
Awesome. Emily Pelton, faculty senator from CSE. My question is more, what is the anticipated impact in terms of the number of students that you anticipate would pursue this type of pathway?
Small numbers. So this is, we have seen, I've been in the Office of Undergraduate Education for about 10 years, and I probably remember 3 or 4 students that we have talked about and just grappled with and tried to think of ways that we could help them come back to the university, and they've ended up going elsewhere because it just did not make sense for them to be here. So really small numbers. It's just providing that pathway so that we don't have those heartbreaking situations. And especially in light of the pandemic where we saw students struggle in different ways, we're anticipating that we could have more students potentially who might fall into this category. And also, I think the pandemic just created more of an interest in this type of policy to have it on campus.
Okay. All right. Thanks, everybody. I think we can proceed with the vote. So Chris, if you could initiate the poll.
We'll give about 10 more seconds if you wish to vote. And last call. There being 59 ayes, 8 nays, and 10 abstentions, that motion prevails.
Okay. Thank you very much. And thank you, Katie, and Bob for being here for the discussion. All right, our next item concerns old business, and there's no old business. So our last item is new business. And before I ask whether there's any new business, I'm going to take some license like Colleen did and thank Colleen for her service as our chair. This is also where Mitch Zamoff and Kristen Hickman finished their terms in these roles. Very grateful to all of you for your partnership and service and for doing such a good job, and looking forward to working with our new officers and your successors, but definitely want to thank you and congratulate you. So is there any other new business? Okay, well, I'll take a motion to adjourn. Is there a motion to adjourn? Yeah, in a second. Thank you, Dean. And Jason, you're the second. So I guess we're already initiating the poll. I have lost control in my very last act.
Sorry about that. We'll give about 10
That's all right.
And last call. There being 76 ayes, 0 nays, 0 abstentions, that motion prevails.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your semester and best wishes.